Hey, Slater Crusaders, America is the greatest country in the world. Thank you for being here. So yesterday was something. Some thoughts. First, what those rioters did yesterday was awful. Terrible, no good, very bad. I have not seen a single conservative commentator give even a hint of support of anything that those people did. Nothing but 100% condemnation, and rightfully so. Everyone who stepped foot into that Capitol building. Now, of course, there's a difference between the peaceful protesters who were there at the rally, right, and the people who went into the Capitol building illegally. That's the distinction, right? Not talking about the people at the rally, I'm talking about the people who were inside the Capitol building. Those people need to be treated, well, they needed to be treated harshly when they were in the building, and they need to be arrested to the fullest extent of the law. You cannot mess around when the entire legislative branch and the vice president are all in one room together. This is no joke. Trump has rightfully bragged in the past about people who tear down federal monuments should get 10 years in prison. And I've been like, yeah, and wouldn't you know it, people stopped tearing down federal monuments as soon as he did that. The people who did this yesterday should too. That's how important yesterday, right? That's how bad what they did yesterday was. And let's not blow yesterday way out of proportion. This is something we do in America. It's a fun new game that we play. Something happens. We respond to that thing like it's the worst thing conceivable, the worst thing that's ever happened in mankind. And then we respond to our reactions, right? So something happens, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being really bad, something happens, it's like a 3. Sometimes some things happen at like a 1, right? And then everyone freaks out about it. And then we respond to the freak out. And in the process, we lose all sense of perspective about the thing that actually happened. The media yesterday, and today, surely, and I promise you, moving forward, that this will be used as the justification for Patriot Act 2.0. We'll talk about that coming up. So surely the media, forever now, will act like these were trained assassins. These were KGB members, Al-Qaeda terrorists who infiltrated the Senate and the House yesterday. Like it was an episode of 24, a Michael Bay movie. These warriors armed with military-grade weapons and grenades and bombs selectively placed in different locations around the Capitol. The media is acting like there were like hostages were taken and senators were killed. And the Capitol was like burned to the ground. It's rubble today. Like yesterday was Pearl Harbor, Gettysburg, and Little Bighorn combined. When in reality, it was these people. Now, it was awful. I don't know how to be more clear about that the people who did this, those clowns right there, they're going to jail. I'm not saying they should go to jail. They will be going to jail for a long time. And we should throw whatever you can at them. And let's not act like the Chinese military invaded the Capitol building and killed the entire legislative branch of the government. It's closer, what happened yesterday is closer to this guy, right? If you want to characterize the people who did this yesterday, focus on this guy. Right? That's the look of a guy saying, holy crap, what have I done? What have I got myself in? I was whipped up in a mob. I'm sitting now here looking like an idiot, and things are kind of quieted down for a second. What do? Call my mommy. And I thought that was the case when this was happening. We were live here when this all happened. And it felt like that. But what really sealed it was this video. This was these trained assassins, or when they got in the Senate chamber. Look at them. They're just like milling about. These are dogs who chased a car and then actually caught it and didn't know what to do with it once they got there. They're just walking around the Senate chamber like they're bored on a school field trip. Doesn't it look like those like stragglers? You went to D.C. on a school field trip, right? And like they got like left behind the group. They got like stuck in they took a wrong turn. They got like stuck in the Senate chambers. Like they're like, you guys got it one more time. They're like sitting down, like taking selfies from the podium. Like that's who we're supposed to be all like the worst thing that ever happened. Like this is the War of 1812. So imagine for a second, instead of this being done by a bunch of losers, imagine that this yesterday was like actual terrorists who, or not, I was gonna say actual terrorists, but like, we don't, like, imagine it was someone with a plan. I'll just like set that bar. But there were like hostages and like bombs and like a whole thing. How would you feel today then? If that's what really happened, because that's how we're acting. But if that really happened, like sit on that for a second. How awful would that be? And how would you respond if that happened? Like if the KGB did take over the Capitol building yesterday, okay? How would you feel? Okay, good. Let's not act like that now, because that's not what happened. A little discretion here. And two things can be true at once. What they did is bad and condemned and go to prison, and let's snap out of it here, people. As Michael Tracy said, you can say this was a significant event, which it was, without saying this was a literal coup attempt, which it wasn't. This was not a coup. There was no effort or circumstance or any potential of like overthrowing the government or even preventing the certification of Biden at all. These were losers, whipped up in a mob mentality who should be punished severely. But let's not give them any more credit than that. This is important. This is important because if you let the media treat these people as coup terrorist plotters, that allows them to inflate the threat, which then will be used to justify a crackdown on you. Hence, Patriot Act 2.0. They're going to combine COVID with what happened yesterday to lock you down in ways that they couldn't have pulled off without yesterday. I'll put it like that. When in reality, what happened yesterday was way closer to college sit-in than it was military coup, even if it's being characterized as the latter. Also, and I repeat, and I got to do this because if anyone takes this segment and clips it up, right, into little segments, and they leave out my initial comments that without the content, right? So I have to say it over and over. I'm against everything that these people did. They should all be arrested. And the media sure quickly realized how bad rioting is, huh? They quickly got a conscience against rioting. This is Kamala, the vice president-elect, telling you to donate to the bail fund of people arrested for rioting and protesting George Floyd. This is Cuomo. Remember when he said that the protesters, who said protesting should be polite and peaceful? Pelosi tearing down statues? Well, people do what they're gonna do. NPR did an entire story, an interview on an author who wrote a book called In Defense of Looting. This was all fine. And now we're supposed to get all worked up at this guy? We're acting like Putin himself executed congressmen live on C-SPAN. I think perspective is healthy at this moment. Remember Chaz in Seattle, right? The autonomous zone. The mayor of Seattle said it's a block party and it could become the summer of love. They took over a police station and made like a lawless for like weeks and summer of love block party. AOC sent a tweet out months ago that the whole point of protesting is to make people uncomfortable. Now, I'm against rioting, all of it, right? I'm against all the rioting of the last year. I'm against what happened yesterday at the Capitol. Let's be consistent on this. These, as you just saw, those pictures, those are peaceful protests. It's Black Lives Matter riots from the summer. Even this from 2018. These are activists, protesters, great Americans storming the Senate office building to protest Kavanaugh. Do you remember it was, I thought it was Ben Sasse, but I think I read this the other day that it was Jeff Flake. But do you remember when Kavanaugh was being confirmed, that whole thing? And whoever it was, I think maybe it was Jeff Flake, was in the elevator. And like these women came up to him and were just screaming at him, screaming in his face. He's like the worst person who's ever. He's like Hitler. I think they maybe even said you're Hitler. And that was like totally fine. Celebrated, great. Look at these heroes, really speaking truth to power. How'd they get in the Senate building? Like how'd they get past to the Senate's elevator? All that's celebrated by the left. But yesterday's the worst day in American history. Come on. I am ticked off at the 100 or how many, I wonder if we'll ever know how many people really got inside the Capitol. 100 people, 200 people, whatever it is. I'm ticked off at them. And I'll say it for the millionth time, they should be all arrested to the fullest extent of the law. I'm ticked off at them for giving conservatives and conservatism a bad name. But we also need to be critical of the people who are going to weaponize these clowns to give you a bad name. New York Times making comparisons to the War of 1812. Come on. Yesterday could have been way worse. It was bad, but let's not lose perspective. All right, I want to come back and talk about how you can't do what the left does. Don't go thinking that you can now do what the left does because they got a pass the last year. It's not how it works. And we'll explain why next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, thanks for joining us all day yesterday when we covered the entire thing live, as it was all unfolding live. We stayed with it all night, too. So if you did not stay up till 4 a.m. yesterday, here's the... By the way, real quick, when we went back, we threw it back to the chamber at, I don't know, what time? 9 or something like that. I was like, oh, they'll probably wrap this up pretty quick now. Right? It's late, been a long day. But no, each senator, each congressman still needed to go do their whole thing, proving that nothing can stop a senator from bloviating. There's nothing. Apparently, like the worst day in American history, like an insurrection in the Capitol building, still you give these people the stage and they'll talk forever. All right, anyway, here's the end of the whole thing yesterday.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes. The announcement of the state of the vote by the President of the Senate shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons elected President and Vice President of the United States, each for the term beginning on the 20th day of January, 2021. The purpose of the joint session having concluded, pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1, 117th Congress, the chair declares the joint session dissolved.
There you go. That was it. It seemed like not super triumphant, right? I thought there would have been like a cathartic hurrah at the end of that. So Trump's conceded. I think this is as much of a concession statement as you're going to get. He was banned from Twitter yesterday, which we'll talk about in a minute as well, because, oh, by the way, so will you. But here's what he said through someone. He said, even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th. I've always said we would continue our fight to ensure that only legal votes were counted. While this represents the end of the greatest first term in presidential history, it's only the beginning of our fight to make America great again, okay? I'm ticked off at the people who rushed the Capitol. They gave conservatives a bad name. I think Trump was an outstanding president. He did some wonderful things, unprecedented peace deals in the Middle East. His foreign policy was nearly spot on, from ending wars all the way to killing Soleimani. Lowering taxes, couldn't have been stronger pro-life, amazing Supreme Court judges, we can go on and on. But this is now how the left will characterize his entire presidency, by a bunch of clowns at the Capitol. And I'm ticked off at them for that. ticked off the media, of course, but ticked off with the clowns. And the left will use these people to criticize you. I know we talked about this in the last segment, but what did you think was going to happen? Like if I could talk to these people, and I hope we can get a hold of some of these people eventually. What was the plan? What did you think was going to happen? Every action needs to be run through a moral filter and then a practical filter. For everyone, all the time, every day, right? Is this thing I want to do, is it righteous? Okay? Yes, it is. Great. Now, is it wise? All right, so first, is it moral? Is it righteous? And then, is it wise? If it's not, then don't do it, even if it is moral, right? So you can make the case that storming the Capitol is moral if you want, okay? Good. And you've decided it is, all right? In some perverted way. Now, is it wise? Because these protesters, they say they support the president, or you say you support conservatism. Look what you accomplished, you idiots. You've done nothing good. You've made conservatives lose all moral high ground, even though every conservative commentator I've heard has 100% condemned what happened. But now we're doing this instead of talking about real election fraud and reform that needs to happen in the future. We've only lost things. We've lost a life. A woman was shot and killed. We've lost, people have lost their freedom because they're going to jail for a long time. You've lost the moral high ground. Thanks, guys. And for what? Loyalty, we'll talk about this another day. Loyalty is an incredibly important virtue, but you always have to ask what you're being loyal to. And you got to be careful putting your allegiance to a person that normally doesn't end well for you. These people are flawed and broken, so be careful tying your ship to someone else's. Instead, you should be loyal to principles. We'll save that for another day. I want to speak about disillusionment for a couple minutes here. I got a lot of, so my radio show yesterday, got a lot of calls from people who were hopeless, exasperated. Slater, what are we supposed to do? What do we do now? And I have such a wildly unsatisfying answer. First thing, perspective. Things may seem bad right now, but the reality is things maybe have never been better in American history. Or we're right up there near the top. I mean, you put COVID aside, which is a weird anomaly, right? But really, things have never been better. You say, Slater, what do you mean? How could you say that? You got clean water, food. Super. You're living better than 99% of people who have ever walked on this planet. Okay, start there. We did a segment, I think it was our first show back from the New Year, 3 days ago. And we said, if you were a man, we did it because we were like, do you have a case of the Mondays? I shared the pep talk I gave myself, lying on bed on Monday morning, be like, vacation's over. If you were a man 100 years ago, you'd probably be dead from the Spanish flu, a real plague. Or you would have your face blown off from serving in the trenches in World War I, where you took shrapnel to your face as you watched the person next to you get blown up by a cluster bomb as people were firing machine guns at you. But things have never been worse. Come on. On a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being like the worst existence that a human could live, which I don't know what that is, right? But like, you work in the salt mines in Africa. You're like a child slave working the salt, right? Or you're working in the rare earth mineral mines in China or something, right? That's like 100, like the worst existence ever. Here in America today, we're like a 6. Now, you wouldn't know it if you watched the media, right? If you watch the media, today's the worst day in American history. We're probably like a 6 on the things are bad scale. Can you even imagine how oppressive it must have been to live in a city and you're constantly at fear of the city being sacked? Like, we don't even have that term, let alone like a concept of a city being sacked. So imagine you're in a city, you mind your own business, and an invading army comes in and literally murders all the men and rapes all the women. That was life for almost all human existence. So let's snap out of the "oh, woe is me" for a minute here. Get a hold of yourself, man. Be grateful and brace yourself for some much, much worse times to come. Things are going to get way worse. That was supposed to be uplifting, but it's true. Now, in terms of what we can do now, I realize why I had so much trouble answering that question in any sort of satisfactory way. And it's because there is no political answer. I mean, yeah, there's like little things, right? We got to end mail-in ballots, although the people yesterday did us no favors in that effort. We got to shore up election integrity. Republicans need to do a better job of getting out the vote and need to do better messaging on certain policies and all that stuff. Yeah, of course. But there's no real political way out of this mess. We'll save this for another day, but Texas is going to go blue one day. They will. California used to be red. California used to be a red state. Last election, Biden won by 30 points. Trump only won Texas by 6. Right? I'd feel confident if Biden won California by 30 and Trump won Texas by 30, we could, right? That's not what's happened. Trump squeaked by in Texas. Meanwhile, the governor of Texas celebrates it every time a Silicon Valley company says they're moving to Texas. You fool. The state's going to turn blue. I don't know when, but they will. And once that happens, then politically, all bets are off. So there's no political solution right now, which people want, because people want like a button to press. There's no button to press. So any answer you give beyond, oh, just press this button and it's all fixed, isn't going to feel good. The answer is it's cultural. Politics is downstream of culture. And as long as the left continues to win the culture war, we have no chance of winning anything politically. And by the way, the left completely has won the culture war. There are no cultural institutions that exist in America that are controlled by conservatives. The only one I can think of is AM talk radio. And when Rush leaves radio, I don't know what that's going to look like moving forward either. There's no cultural institution owned by conservatives, or that even conservatives have an equal stake in. And there's no way conservatives can take any of it back. Every cultural institution in this country is controlled by the left. And there's no, let's take Hollywood, all right? You think Hollywood's going to make a conservative movie ever again? You think conservatives can take over Hollywood film companies? No way. First of all, they're all owned by the Chinese now. Can't happen. So the solution is we got to make our own movies. And that's why I encourage everyone to support the Daily Wire's first feature film. It's called Run, Hide, and Fight. It's about a school shooter. And there's a girl who was raised by her dad to hunt and personal responsibility, and she ends up fighting back against the school shooters, right? Comes out next week, January 14th. It's on the Daily Wire website. We got to support them. We got to support individual efforts to create alternative, conservative, valued content, right? That's Hollywood example. In news, do a little self-promotion here. Don't watch the mainstream news. Like, it's over. They're done. Even Fox. And this is why I'm so grateful for the First. We're creating our own thing here, right? Our own economy here. The people behind the scenes here at the First have worked so incredibly hard and have taken massive risks to make this work. Because there's a need for this. This is important. And that's why I'm so grateful you're here. Public schools are gone. Are you kidding me? You gotta start your own school. We gotta support more local homeschool efforts, like hybrid efforts, private school options, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. You're not gonna take over the public schools. It's right? Public schools are never gonna have the 10 Commandments on the wall ever again, for instance. I would argue public schools are never again gonna have a boys' room and a girls' room, okay? That's how far gone we are. There's never going to be a conservative revolution at Yale and Harvard. So we got to support Hillsdale College and the handful of other schools that promote real traditional values. I got to go here. Let me wrap up here. I'm going to steal a point from Jack Murphy. I understand these people's rage from yesterday. I understand Black Lives Matter's rage. I get it. The difference is MAGA is not in alignment with the corporations and the media and the cultural institutions. Black Lives Matter and Antifa are. So they can riot, and they're heralded as great patriots fighting against the man, truth to power. You can't do that. You can't act like the left. If you're on the right and you try to do these things, you'll be destroyed by these institutions and the people in them. You'll get no cover. Black Lives Matter activists, they can burn down buildings and get plenty of cover. A Trump supporter goofing off in the Capitol Rotunda gets 10 years in prison. So the right has to have a completely different strategy than the left. The left can riot and burn down buildings. You can't. Nor should we, but you can't. We lost a lot of things today, as I talked about, and you're going to lose a lot more freedoms. This is going to be used to justify a new Patriot Act, combined with COVID, and it's going to be used to shut you down forever. We need completely different tactics, and it's a cultural shift. I recommend you take some money, whatever you decide, 10 bucks, 20, 30 bucks a month, find people that you support who are starting their own Patreon or Substack or whatever, their own individual efforts. Luckily, we're here at The First. We're free for you, but you can support our sponsors and build up these other institutions. We need the cultural shift, and then politics eventually will reflect that. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, want to go to one of our favorite guests, Dave Bratt. He is a former congressman from Virginia, and now he's the dean of the business school at Liberty University. Congressman, former congressman. Do people call you congressman? What's the deal with that?
Hey, Dean Dave.
Dean Dave, I dig it. What is your advice to President Trump today? What do you think he should do today? And then also for the next 14 days?
Yeah, I think it's time for everyone in the country to go back to first principles and lay them out on paper so there's no misunderstandings. And just to get back to the fundamentals that set the country up, a return to Judeo-Christian values and traditions, the rule of law, which was violated yesterday up at the Capitol, and then values and virtues that go with having a free market society and a pro-business society and what it takes to keep our freedom. And so everybody knows this debate's been going on for 4 years. Started off with a Steele dossier and all that. So you can go back and forth on all this and where all this anger is coming from. But in my view, the president, everybody, Democrat, Republican, we need to have a public debate on our first principles and see if we still have agreement on those things. Commitment to absolute truth, natural rights, rights for all people, and freedom and liberty, etc. And I think that would help some healing here.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's like, I don't know why I always have the image of like a basketball team or something. I don't know why I always do it. But you know, when it's so chaotic, you're right. You just gotta like, all right, everyone, cut it out. Let's do the drills. Let's get back to our basic drills, and then we can go from there. Okay, what does the president? And I love that we can all do that, and we're gonna do that. You've inspired me to do that, and we'll do a segment tomorrow on those first principles and the basics. What does the president need to say? Because yesterday he gave some like meh statements that weren't superb, et cetera. So is there anything he can do now that you think would be wise?
Yeah, well, the tragedy of yesterday is, you know, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was getting ready to lay out evidence finally, where the mainstream media could no longer ignore that a state house has now brought formal proceedings that need to be reviewed. And so the takeover of the Congress kept that evidence from being seen in the daylight hours. It was reviewed after midnight. And so the president needs to just formalize these things and keep things very sober right now and just lay out documents showing the history of what's happened. And then, you know, we have major work to do when it comes to the First Amendment, big media, Twitter, et cetera. We need to have national conversations on that. That whole debate needs to be laid out. In terms of free markets, et cetera, we don't have them anymore, right? We have six big giant tech firms that are running the whole stock market. They're monopolies, and they need to be broken up, right? They have a capital valuation bigger than all of the European markets added together. Our six big firms are bigger than all of Europe together. That's not America anymore. And so the American people have a lot of gripes now. China, our business elites, are dealing with a company who threatened us in a document back in 1999. The Chinese said, we're going to go, we saw what you did in the Gulf War. We can't fight you that way. So we're at war with you, information war, tech war, et cetera. And so there's a ton of heavy lifting we got to do, but too much of it's been dramatized due to the mainstream media. And we just got to get back to rationality and see if that's alive anymore, right? The problem there is the elite campuses have all been taken over by Marxist faculty.
Well, so this is a point I made in the previous segment, that the left has taken over every single cultural institution that exists in America, except for, I'd say, AM talk radio and a handful of universities, Hillsdale, Liberty, maybe being the two that come to mind the most. And then you talked about big tech. How do conservatives... So my argument was that you can't, there's never going to be a conservative takeover at Harvard and Yale. Like, conservatives aren't going to take over Hollywood. We got to build our own institutions.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that? Like, how do we do that, and how does the free market come at play here?
Well, I think we can at least ask for a return, right? Harvard's motto in 1640, when it was founded, was truth for Christ and church. And now I don't know what they don't have a commitment to truth with a capital T. And so I do think we have to make some claims there and ask them, hey, dear Harvard, can you name a philosopher or theologian or thought leader who can describe what your university's mission is now? Because if you can't even identify anyone who stands for what you believe, that itself is anti-intellectual, right? If you can't name an intellectual that's leading the ideas and values and virtues that you believe in as an intellectual institution, it's a comedy of errors, right? It's Orwell on steroids. And so at Liberty, we have no problem stating our first principles, the books we hold dear, the thinkers we hold dear. It's called the Western synthesis, right? It's the synthesis of Athens and Jerusalem, of Greek reason and the Judeo-Christian religious tradition. And that's been fused together. Our whole history is that, from Plato on through Jesus and Augustine and the Middle Ages. We can go century by century up through the founders. Madison went to Princeton and studied Hebrew as a graduate student, right? And so this is our tradition. This is the West. Adam Smith up in Protestant Scotland signed on to the Calvinist thing, and Hume wouldn't. And so there's always been some guardrails there with a Western tradition. And now it's being thrown out with no replacement, right? The Marxists are in constant, permanent revolution. That's what they do. They do revolution. They don't have ideas. They don't tell you what is going to be in place in the promised land. And that's their fundamental weakness. They make all sorts of promises, but they don't tell you what's coming next. And it's always the same thing. A few elites that run the Marxist regime, and they take over all the wealth in the country and repress the people. Over and over and over. Every single country that's experimented, that is the outcome.
We got to bring all that stuff back to life. This needs to be, certainly everyone watching this right now, myself included, needs to be a scholar and on all those people and ideas and philosophies you just mentioned and more. That's the first step. But no one likes that because that requires work, Dave. You know what I mean?
That's right. Eat your spinach.
It's hard and it's not instant. And we want instant solutions.
Yep. Well, I'll give one to make it easy. Everyone should go back and look at The Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom, national bestseller, New York Times, until the New York Times figured out what was in it. But a world-class philosopher, not in my tradition, but that's kind of why I recommend him, because the insights in that book, the introduction is phenomenal. And his chapters on values, going from Marx through Nietzsche and Max Weber, are just incredible. So there's some shorthand notes for you, and go take a peek. at that book on especially the chapter on values, which itself is a modern term, and moderns don't even know that, right? Nietzsche wasn't being a smart aleck when he said God is dead. He meant it as an analytical explanation of Europe at the time. And he said God is dead in Europe, and they don't have a replacement in thought. And we're seeing that grow out, right? And it was the replacement of the Judeo-Christian conceptions and reality of good versus evil. And that morphed into a tradition of values and feelings and I'm okay, you're okay, this modern, lightweight stuff. That's now the lexicon. And it's all traced out in that book. If folks are interested, that's a great place to start.
That reminds me of Solzhenitsyn. He said, men have forgotten God. That's why all this has happened. And he said he talked to so many people in Russia over the years, older people who have seen it all happen and seen the worst and whatever. And he said, I've come to no more clear, concise, accurate conclusion than men have forgotten God. And I like that you keep saying that it hasn't been replaced by anything.
That's right. That's it.
Are you... Okay, let's go down. I got one more question down this road. We can go to a lot of different places, but I like this path. So what do we need to replace it with? Right? What's a truth? Give me one of these fundamental philosophical truths that you think we need to revive in America.
Yeah. Well, the intro to Bloom's book says there's only one thing that modern young students are absolutely certain of. The only absolute truth is that there are no absolute truths. And so that's the first thing. We have to return to the idea that there is absolute truth. And then that's been the dialogue since Plato's Republic. And so Bloom argues in order to have a republic, you need a commitment to absolute truth along the natural law route that made claims of natural rights. And that picture up above my shoulder there are the founders. That's the document of the Constitution which enshrined these rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which precede government, right? They're endowed, we're endowed by our Creator, by God, with these rights that are natural, God-given, and absolute. And governments have no right in that sphere. They don't get to mess with that. That's God-given, and that's what some of the tension is about, is a debate on those rights. Life, liberty, pursuit of liberty is central there, right? And the left now has become the party of control, not freedom. They want control and power, not freedom, and that right there is the trade-off.
And my worry is last night is going to be used as justification for a Patriot Act 2.0 to take away that very liberty even more. Dave Bratt, former congressman, now he's the dean of the business school at Liberty University. Dave, appreciate you, brother. We'll do it again.
Hey, right back at you, Mike. Thanks.
Have an awesome
show.
Day.
You too.
Thanks, bro. Closing the American Mind by Bloom. Closing of the American Mind. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, want to go to a former congressman who just left office 2 years ago, so still knows many of the people who were there yesterday. Former Congressman Dennis Ross. Dennis, how are you, sir?
Very good, Mike. How are you?
Good to talk to you. Have you talked to anyone who was there yesterday?
My successor, Scott Franklin, who was just recently elected to Congress, I've texted him and welcomed him to Congress in an unusual fashion. He's a naval aviator, so he's used to combat, but not in this sense. It was a tragic day, a very tragic day.
Yeah, yeah, so absurd. There's so many places to go. Let's start with Trump, and we'll work our way down.
Yes.
What should the president do today, and what should he do in the next 14 days? He calls up Dennis Ross and says, Dennis, what do I do today? What do you tell him?
I would tell him, Mr. President, you're going to have to listen to your advisors this time. For once in your life, you're going to have to exercise some sense of humility and extend an olive branch and apologize to the American people for what happened, and to acknowledge that the only way this country survives and sustains itself at a higher level is to unite all factions of this nation. And to that end, I would work to make sure that happens for a peaceful transfer of power on January 20th. Any credibility he has right now is very minimal. And you know, the talk of impeachment, the talk of exercising the 25th Amendment is not healthy for this nation. And he is the only one in control. He was the one in control yesterday. His legacy could be so bright with what he has done, not only with the economy, but also with international relations in terms of trade. And what happened with American-Israel relations is phenomenal. No other president has ever done that. The peace in the Middle East and the accords with several Arab nations over there was phenomenal. But all that will be tainted by what happened yesterday. So he's got to come out and take responsibility, not for the sake of the nation, let alone the party, but for the sake of the nation. The American people need to hear this. They need to know that what happened yesterday cannot and should not ever happen again.
How much responsibility do you put on, for yesterday, do you put on the president and like the president like for the last couple weeks, or the president and what he said at the rally beforehand? And how much responsibility did you put on the people who like actually stormed the Capitol? Like, how do you think through that?
Well, you know, I'm going to leave a lot of this to the investigators who actually find out what the facts are. But I can tell you from my perspective, over the last 4 years, when the left did their best to disenfranchise this president and to delegitimize his election from 4 years ago, this has been a constant powder keg that has been building and building, and the crescendo occurred yesterday. Nobody was in the right yesterday, and there are so many factions, so many groups, left, right, and even in the middle that will be called in on this for what has happened over the last 4 years that actually led to yesterday. Yesterday could have been avoided. It could have been avoided yesterday. Unfortunately, the passion which turned into excitement, which turned into violence, probably all started well over 4 years ago and finally hit a crescendo yesterday with comments made by the president and actions taken by his supporters.
I'm so ticked off for all the reasons you said about how this is going to be used to characterize not only him, but us and all the good things that have happened the last 4 years, and that's such a shame. So two things. What's the Republican Party do? Like your former colleagues in Congress, what do they do?
Well, you know, interesting, Mike. I was a Trump supporter when he was elected, and during that election, especially after the Billy Bush tapes came out, you could maybe get 6 members of Congress in a room that were supporting Trump at that time in October of 2016. After the election in 2016, there were Make America Great hats again on all our seats in the first Republican conference. Every leader in the Republican conference was taking credit for the win. You couldn't fit all the members of Congress in a room that now supported Trump. My party has got to think of the greater good. They've got to consider that what's best for this nation is to unite people of all diversities together, and that has been the beauty of our nation. So the Republican Party has got to do a lot of introspective soul-searching to determine what type of leadership do they want to have express their values and their principles, which I believe are on the side of right, which, you know, are good conservative principles. But how you communicate them and how you deliver them, will the messenger be divisive or will the messenger be unifying? And I think that's where the Republican Party has got. It's going to be hard over the next couple of years. But look at it this way, Mike. We've got 32 legislatures that are controlled by Republicans right now that will determine the boundaries for Congress in 2 years. There is a very good chance Congress can become, your House can become Republican in 2 years. There's a close majority, well, it's a tie in the Senate. I mean, if they exercise the future to their benefit and work to unite, we will see the resurgence of a Republican Party for the greater good of the American people. That's what I think the Republican Party should be focusing on.
I think that's right. I've said from the jump here that if I were to choose which party tactically which party to be in right now, I'd choose the Republican side over the Democrat side right now.
Yeah.
Well, that was at least before yesterday, but I think that's still true if we handle this wisely moving forward. What are some? I had a lot of callers on my radio show yesterday. People calling in, they're like, "What do we do?" And I think they were looking for political solutions. And I'm more of like it's cultural. I think politics are downstream of culture, so that's just sort of where I always lean. But you're a political guy, right? You're a former congressman. What are some political solutions? And I think people were looking for like a button to press. So yeah. I don't know if there's like short-term ones, but also more long-term. What do conservatives need to do?
Well, as in any tragedy that occurs our nation, I was there when the baseball tragedy occurred. It brought together everybody, but at least for a short period of time, What we need to do is we don't need to continue to throw our swords in the air and say, let's take them on. We need to seek reconciliation with our nation. The eyes of the international world are upon us to see how we handle something that should never have happened and has only happened one time in 1814 in the War of 1812 when the English overtook our capital. This is a monumental milestone in American history. We should look at it as, how do we correct this? How do we bring people together? It requires humility, a quality so rare but so necessary in the political world. And so I would tell my political friends, you know, there is a system in place that was set in place by our founders over 243 years ago to allow for us to seek better lives, better productivity, and a better nation. Let us utilize those processes, but it does not involve the sword, not from within. Maybe when we defend from what's attacking us from outside, yes. But I would tell you, there is no button to push other than we've got to exercise some humility and some reconciliation. I am not being cowardice about this at all. I'm finding a lot of strength in identifying what our weaknesses are. And our weakness right now is that we are not coming together as a nation. Yeah,
humility is the key word. We're going to do a segment tomorrow on magnanimity, being magnanimous. Yes. And that's used to be one of the great virtues. So we're going to do a study on that tomorrow. Got to go here, 30 seconds. We don't control the media at all. How do conservatives get their messaging out?
We need statesmen. We need to identify what the character is that we want to have of our leaders and then demand that from our leaders. We need people who are not only passionate, but are also able to communicate articulately their vision with an understanding of their opposition, because I have as much chance of convincing you as you do of me. And knowing that going into it, let us get through this in a civil fashion. Let us go on to the next argument. Let's go on to the next debate. And even though we may not resolve it at that time, at least we'll build a relationship, and a good relationship. We need statesmanship in this country.
Trump's argument is, yeah, but I won. I'm in the White House. It takes this type of fighter to win. You can have your Scott Walker statesman all day. He's a loser. I won. What's your rebuttal?
The history will show him to be absolutely wrong. And that's unfortunate.
Dennis Ross, former congressman, Florida. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you. It was great. All right, tomorrow we'll do that segment on magnanimity, and we'll talk about those first principles that Dave Bratt talked about. We're gonna help us all get back to those. True story. Mike Slater. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.